Hey, I've got some good news and some bad news. We're back for Connect This, and it's the last show of the year. You can figure out which part of that is bad news and which part of that is a good news. Different people may have different reactions. I'm excited to talk a little bit about what's been happening lately and what's been happening all year, reflecting on it with some of my favorite folks to laugh at me. We got Travis Carter from USI Fiber in Minneapolis. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Honored to be here with you.
Episode 60. This is 2.5 years now, I think. Doing well. Loving it.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah, living the dream.
I appreciate you letting me hang out with you. Letting me hang out with you.
Yeah, not a lot of people say that, so I'm glad we're getting this recorded. We got Doug Dawson from CCG Consulting. Welcome.
I am putting in my reservation right now. I want to be on episode 100. So
yeah. Well, that sounds good. You've been on almost every episode for the past 20, so I think it's a pretty good shot. Doug, only recently did your AOL address stop working, and I'm curious, what made you stop being one of the more than 1 million people who are still on AOL?
I hadn't checked that thing in 5 years, so if it was working, I have no idea what's on there. I bet there's about 19,000 spams in there.
I think you had some sort of forward set up because it was getting to you. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And then we got Kim McKinley from UTOPIA Fiber. Welcome.
Cheers, everyone, to a year.
I love the holiday spirit. It's lovely.
I'm going all in, and it's ginger beer for all those who are wondering.
Excellent. I just got to show off. I got my.
See? It's.
Oh, now I feel bad. I feel bad. I have like 7 Grateful Dead Christmas shirts, and I didn't wear one.
Yeah. Way to go. Didn't you know it's Christmas season, Doug? Come on.
No one told me.
This is the Merry Twitmas shirt from the This Week in Tech show that got me into podcasting in 2006. Yeah, where I started getting into this sort of stuff. So it's been wonderful. What a year. And Kim, you won an award. Well, you were part of a project that won an award. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think it's a couple Tuesdays ago, the Yellowstone Fiber team, which used to be named Bozeman Fiber, won the Bond Buyers Small Issuance Deal of the Year. So huge accomplishment for the financial team who put that together and got it across the finish line because it was a $65 million deal with a conduit revenue bond. So basically no backstop to that bond and less than a 4% interest rate. So that could not happen today in the market that we were in. That happened last January that we closed on that.
And that's terrific. That project has broken ground. It's moving forward. Good stuff happening.
It's great stuff happening. We needed the ground to get a little above, freezing. I think today the high is supposed to be -4 up there. So you're not seeing me go up to Bozeman probably until March.
We are desperate for low temperatures here. I shouldn't say we when Travis is around because he's not, but I'm waiting for the ground to freeze. I want to ice skate. And as of right now, this is still too warm. And now we're getting this stupid snow that's going to trap the heat. And we're not going to be ice skating until January. It's miserable, lame. This week in ice skating, next week. There's a lot going on. I feel like I was just reflecting. I was looking back on some of the Keller and Heckman emails that they put out, the old Jim Baller Herbst list, rounding it up. And there's a lot going on. It's exciting. I feel like ending the year strong. I feel like there's been a lot of little news. That's Kim. You were kind of reflecting that. I think there hasn't been a lot of big news, but there's been a lot of little news.
No, I think it's been a great year. I think there's a lot of things that are happening. A lot of momentum, but it's kind of been a little anticlimactic of bum, 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 everything's coming. And what actually has been delivered, how much money has actually hit the ground from the BEAD and the infrastructure bill or the BEAD money.
Well, let's talk about one other thing too. We'll talk about some of that, the BEAD coming up, but also a year ago, I feel like we were all talking about the supply chain disruptions. And I'm curious, Kim and Travis, as you've been building, have you substantially had to change your plans because of a lack of equipment?
Go ahead, Travis. You go first.
Well, let's just say that the supply chain ended up all delivering, and now we have 6 times more product than we normally have. So every yard is full, every warehouse is full. everything is full, and all of the suppliers have been diligently asking when we're ready to accept our next shipments. So apparently this free government handout money hasn't been handed out yet. So everyone that geared up for it, it's all coming our way. So we're
all right. So
all vendors out there, we're full.
I'm gonna turn around what you usually do to me, Travis, and say the Mitchell Carter Emporium is about ready to be open then.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to buy conduit, we're full. So yeah.
You gonna mark it up, Travis? You gonna mark it up some before you resell
well,
it?
the problem is that it keeps going up in price. So I'll sell the newest stuff. I'm hanging on to the old stuff that was cheaper. So how about you, Kim? Do you have any? Are you short?
I think we've struggled at points through the year, but I think for the most part we've gotten through it. I think we've done some creative approaches with Yellowstone that we couldn't get stuff for up in Yellowstone, so we used some of the inventory we had at UTOPIA and just did a trade until that stuff came in. But it's been a very interesting year, but you are seeing the supply chain ease up. But what I am hearing is you're seeing some of the suppliers who are backing off on their travel, and some of those major people in this industry who are getting stuff cut because of what the excess that Travis is experiencing right now is that they ramped up, and now it's like there's not the demand coming towards them.
Now, I have a slightly different story because I work with really tiny guys, right? Each of them is having very peculiar one or two issues. I've got two companies who they're building a municipal network, first time, no past history. They can't get handholds. Both of them have decided to make their own. They created a concrete form, and they're making homemade handholds.
How is that going for them?
Seems to be working. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I mean, they made a good form. They took their time and did it right, and so you can always get creative around a lot of the stuff on the list, but they're at the bottom of the supply chain where they don't get the stuff because it's all sitting in Travis's warehouse.
I was gonna say if they want, they could melt down some of that resin maybe and create a handhold out of the resin.
Well, it is interesting though that I would tell you, Chris, you're interviewing probably two of the very few active Ethernet networks that are in the country. And so I would say that Kim and I are able to ebb and flow a little better than, let's say, you're locked into like Calix's ecosystem. You're at the mercy of them getting you product. But Doug does bring up an interesting point. Of the items we had the biggest challenge with this year, handholds was without a doubt. That was number one.
And that just doesn't make sense to me because that should be one of those items that is not hard to spin up a factory. It's not the fiber optic cable. It's not the components that require Taiwanese chips.
Well, that's the problem. But that's the problem the car guys had. They weren't having a problem getting the chips. They weren't having a problem getting.
They couldn't get handholds either.
They couldn't. They couldn't get things like door handles. You can't do the car till it's finished. So they were missing they were missing very small components, but then they can't ship the cars out the door.
I don't know. Elon figured out how to do it without the door handles. So
he doesn't make as many cars as the big guys. That's so.
Here's what I've learned: the bigger and the heavier the piece, the harder it is to get. So handholds are big and heavy, and they're difficult to move around. So those tend to be little widgets and stuff. There doesn't seem to be a problem with those.
Well, we're going to wrap this up in a second, but I just wanted to share. I don't know, Kim, if you travel more than I do, and I'm curious if you've seen this, but it does seem to me that it is not getting better out there for staff. Every hotel I've been at for the past 6 months is long lines and one person working or two people working that clearly have not been there that long. The restaurants, there's massive shortages of workers, and I have to assume that's going to continue reverberating through everywhere.
I think so. I think you're going to see that. Although the last hotel I checked in to, I must have looked terrible because they were like, here's a free drink card and a free appetizer card. Like, how bad do I look?
So this is a moment that I want to do before we get too far into it, but I want to note that this show is being competently managed because I'm not doing it. So thank you, Rye. Rye had to move his schedule around a bit today to keep accommodating that I keep moving the show around, but terrific to have you able to be running the show. And thanks for your great year of work on it to make sure that this happens, and really appreciate that. Ryan and I would both like to thank all of you all who are our guests, co-hosts, people who are watching, and we want to encourage you all to help us get to the next level of LinkedIn. We want to be able to broadcast the show on LinkedIn, but to do that, we need 40 more followers on our LinkedIn page. And the link is there. It's linkedin.com/showcase/community/broadband-networks. So if you can just head on over there, you can.
How the heck is somebody going to remember that?
It's on the screen. It's right there on the screen. I can see it.
I would expect the three of us aren't even on there, are we?
I was going to say that.
I did like it.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Well, the question is whether you followed it, I think. I will. So if people are there, if we get to 150, at that point, you can search Community Broadband Networks on LinkedIn as well. But if we get to 150, then the show will start to broadcast there as well. We'll pick up new serendipitous watchers. It'd be wonderful if we could kick off January being able to broadcast there and just massively increase our audience to maybe 4 or 5 people. So
I'll fix it. I'll follow it 100 times. How's that? We need some bots.
Can you put that link in the comments, Rye?
Yeah,
I think you will.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So first topic, and we're going to start with Travis on this because he might be the only one who watched all of it. The Senate had a hearing. Was it I don't remember. Is it the Senate? Is the Senate Commerce Committee had a hearing, ensuring solutions to meet America's broadband needs. Travis, are you reassured that Congress is up for this task of making sure that we all have a good internet connection?
Well, I'm actually a little disappointed in you, Chris. I think you just did this to me to tease me. So there I sat for 2.5 hours and I took a few notes on this topic. And I don't know who these people are, but I would tell you from my external observation, Mr. Senator Thune from South Dakota, the good people of South Dakota, good job in voting that gentleman in. He seemed to know what was going on.
No, he didn't. Are you kidding me? Let's be clear about this.
Did you watch it?
I watched it. Okay. Senator Thune's top concern for the people of South Dakota, where we have thousands upon thousands of people on tribal lands who have no internet access. What is he concerned about? You know what? We might be putting too much money into broadband. Are we building too many rural broadband networks, Travis? There's really good broadband out there already. Are we putting too much money in to try and take away the good jobs that have been provided by CenturyLink and whatever? It was crap. It was awful. Thune was terrible. He was wretched.
He asked for your opinion, and then he just started yelling at you.
What I really tried to do is I tried to pick the person out that I knew would annoy Chris the most, and I wanted to make sure that I got that done.
My favorite part of Thune, I was literally on an email thread that I think maybe Kim may have even been on, the NDIA list. Senator Thune just sat there and ignored that there was 2 women on the panel. Right? There's 2 women. One is Kimball, who is doing a lot of great work on the Pueblos in New Mexico, connecting these tribes, and then Angela Seifer, who's been a multiple-time guest on this show, who runs the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and the 2 of them didn't even exist as far as Thune was concerned. He can only talk to the 2 guys from the trade, the trade companies, the big cable companies and the big telephone companies. Everyone else didn't exist for Senator Thune.
Well, that's who makes the contributions, So
yeah, no, it's very clear who Senator Thune is concerned with. He wants to make sure the telephone companies that are contributing money to his campaign are making sure that they're not seeing competition in rural areas, because our biggest problem is we might be building too much network in rural areas. Travis, you triggered me. Congratulations. I'll stop yelling at you now.
Okay. Now we have a challenge. How many times can you trigger him in one show, Travis?
Well, that was the thing. That was a softball. I knew that was. But I will say, the Honorable Mr. Thune had some data points that I did not know, which plays into my total confusion of this show. That there are 15 agencies with 133 broadband programs currently going on.
I'm not even sure that's accurate. I don't know where that comes from.
Okay, I don't know.
Well, here's how they do it. It's a silly statistic. Remember 2 years ago, the federal government was made to create a broadband manual of all the different ways agencies could help you. So they all came out and listed something they could do to help you, and 95% of those made no sense. So that's the number of agencies. They're going like, if you want to apply for a permit on Indian land, we might be able to get in your way, and that was what they put in the thing.
Yeah, and on top of that,
so they don't have programs. They were forced to reply with something, so they did. So yeah, it's more like a dozen agencies that have something.
But this is
that's way better. Okay, so
yeah.
Well, this is one of the things that also drove me nuts. Is at one point there was a question about the way that federal agencies are not responding to permits in a timely manner, on Western lands in particular. And I have no doubt this is true. I hear about this. I hear about this constantly. And you know what would really help? What would really help is if senators just yelled at the people in the Western agencies. I mean, the Western agencies have suggested that they've put together a package of $30 million that could allow them to hire the staff to handle the volume of permit requests they're getting. Does Senator Thune say, oh, maybe we should fund these agencies to do the work that we've required them to do? No, he says these people are probably deadbeats and like we should just maybe even fire them. And then maybe the permits will be processed more quickly. I don't know. But the Senate has had an option for years to actually fund the agencies to do this freaking work, and they don't. They just keep giving them more rules to follow without giving them any capacity to do it.
I love this. You trigger him, then he has a re-trigger.
Yeah, like I was like, welcome to Connect This, Senator Thune edition.
I watched 1 hour of that hearing, and I cannot watch anymore because of my heart.
All right, so continuing on with my notes here. The $4.7 billion that NTIA got in 2009, did we ever audit that to determine if we got much for it? Any sense? I was curious.
Well, I don't believe so. I worked on some of this project and never got audited.
Okay.
So,
yeah, some of them were terrible. Some of them were pretty good. Like the city of
they
Duluth.
were middle mile, and it's kind of hard to audit middle mile.
I'm gonna catch my breath for a second, but I've got a rant on that.
Story. The one is actually a good one. So yeah.
Duluth, the city of Duluth is using rescue plan dollars to extend broadband to 900 premises in the lowest income neighborhood of Duluth. And they're building that off of the Northeast Service Cooperative, which has expanded fiber throughout schools. And I mean, previously it was like, there was like $400,000 a month or like a $400,000 charge to build a T1 line up north of Lake Superior. And the Northeast Service Cooperative took federal dollars and resolved all that, made sure they all had fiber. So there are some really good projects out there that have resulted in a lot. But
before that network, those northern counties CenturyLink would go out for a week or two. They'd have no broadband for 2 weeks running. It was terrible. So.
Well, and like it's not just no broadband. They would have no 911. Like the border patrol on the Canadian border would be like using personal cell phones, I think, to like do stuff. There's no credit cards that could run. I mean, I don't know about it being 2 weeks for all of that being down, but there was definitely like intense outages prior to that, where like someone would dig, you get that backhoe operator in Duluth that would mess up the one cable. So
no, Cook County had a 2-week one. That's what prompted them to build their own network. So yeah.
Right. But Travis, to give you a sense of how this worked, I was involved in this in the comments in 2009. NTIA said, we got all this money. How should we spend it? And I said, last mile. You should definitely spend it on last mile. It's not going to go very far, but it'll demonstrate the need and it'll result in a lot of benefits. The big cable and telephone companies said, oh, you can't spend any of this on last mile. You got to do all middle mile. Middle mile is important. Middle mile will result in lots of last mile investment, which is dumb because that's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked anywhere. So the government went with what the big cable and telephone companies told them. They built middle mile. And then the big cable and telephone companies went to Congress and said, you spent all this money and you didn't connect any businesses or residents. This is a failure. And they literally lobbied for years saying that the money was a failure because they had followed what the big cable and telephone companies told them to do. It was nuts. And that taught me a lot about how to understand the way Washington, D.C. doesn't work.
Rant number 3. We're on a roll.
What do you think?
Merry Christmas to
all
all
of
of us.
Doug? Am I
oversimplifying? You're absolutely right. What else is on your list, Mr. Carter? This is good.
Yeah.
Well, so I had to pause the Senate hearing quite often and try to Google the word salad that was going on between all these folks. I've been out of corporate America for a while, but it became very, very clear very quickly that I invite the council to invite the 4 of us on there, and I won't be anywhere near as polished as these people, but happy to tell them the kind of what's really happening on the street. So I think in this entire 2.5 hours, the actual quantifiable things that they could help with, easing the permits. So so in Minneapolis here, we want to go about a mile, and it's through some federal property. We anticipate to have the permit back in 2025. Okay. So, and for some reason that seems normal. Right. So, okay. And then the second thing I gleaned from it is they touched on it a little bit about reasonable pole pricing. I thought that was a pretty good conversation, but the rest of it was me thinking, I don't know why Chris is having me watch this for 2.5 hours. Because it didn't seem like there was a ton there. But,
I believe I warned you.
Yeah. I would love for them to say, hey, give the four of us like $100 million, and then we'll find a project somewhere and we'll design it, execute it, run it, operate it. Because the thing that they mentioned, and they only mentioned it for a fraction of the time, was long-term sustainability of these networks. Mm-hmm. And my fear on this is that they're going to build these networks with no sustainability in mind, and they're not going to be able to fund themselves. Mm-hmm. So guess what's going to end up happening? All the big incumbents are just going to pick them up for 10 cents on the dollar or less and run them. So I am going to change my prediction that 99.6% of all this money will just go into the incumbents' hands.
I want to say that I think Angela Seifert did a really good job, in Kimball as well, in terms of trying to bring some reality to the panel from what they're seeing of their experiences. Mm-hmm. Angela called for a full FCC commission, which I think is good. I think that it's about dang time the Senate did its job and confirmed Gigi. They called for more funding for ACP that's going to run out in 2 years, have some certainty there, which I think lines up with what you were saying, Travis. And then Angela had a number of other things in terms of what tribes need and what local groups need in terms of digital equity funding to make sure that people are able to take advantage of these networks. And I thought that was good. Kim, if you're going to watch any of it, let me encourage you to watch the part, which I think is on the order of like 30 to 45 minutes in, where one of the Democratic senators asks Jonathan Spalter from US Telecom, which is the big telephone companies, about bandwidth caps. And the look on his face and the way he searches for words as he tries to figure out how to say, this is a wonderful thing that some of our wonderful members do to try to make sure that people who are older aren't paying too much for their internet service. So bandwidth caps are how we make sure that elderly people can use the internet. He also said that it was $45 a month that most people were paying for service, which I don't know what year he pulled that from, but I think it was in the 90s.
But I think this is the problem with some of these lovely people who are on the panel, is that they know nothing about telecom, and they've read a paper probably from 1995, and it had a lot of word salad that, as Travis mentioned, that nobody could understand. So they just speak in circles. So they think they're smart and that they say words, but they don't mean anything. And let's go back, Chris. Why can't we just?
They wanted. The $45 was to plant that in senators' head that's the price.
Yeah, well, you can say it.
Exactly one. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kim.
No. But what's wrong with unlimited bandwidth caps? Is like, so if we have unlimited, does limited make it like more cost effective? Is what they're trying to say for the older.
Industry would claim that if they had to provide unlimited service, the prices would go up. The reason they can keep their prices so low is because they make sure that they're not giving people too much of the product. Because, if I use more internet access, Comcast's bill goes up substantially. I'm pretty sure that's how they said it works.
I just wanted to ask Travis.
Charter's at 90 and Comcast is at 92. How much more would they go up to, Travis? What's the magic number?
100. We got a big face now, Doug. Okay, but Chris, you did realize that nobody wanted to talk about the reality of broadband usage. They're all in there talking about, the kids can't go to school, the kids can't do this. It's not what the kids use this stuff for. Every kid I during the whole COVID gig that I talked to were playing video games, watching, they were on Twitch streams, they were watching Netflix, and they were screwing around. They weren't doing homework because the amount of bandwidth.
They were doing homework though. They were doing both. I think it's worth saying they were doing both. More bandwidth went to the games.
Yes. No, they weren't. They okay.
You don't think they did any homework?
No, all they did is have their little Zoom session up, so they were there.
They needed to have it for Zoom, though, Travis.
We did an event a few years ago in Southeast Ohio in the Appalachians, and one of the guest speakers was a woman. It's just weird. Calling 18-year-olds a girl is just awkward. So I'm going to say a woman who was a valedictorian who had no internet access in her house most of the time. She had a cell plan that was shared among her family that they sometimes she could use. But for the most part, she had to go to school early and she had to leave and she had to stay after school to get her homework done there and become valedictorian. And there are hundreds of kids at that school, I'm guessing, who did not do that and did not have that opportunity, and had less of an education. And I think it's inaccurate, Travis. And I don't think you want to defend the proposition that these kids are not doing any of their homework or things like that. But yeah, they are playing games, and frankly, their ability to play games adds like thousands of dollars of value to that property, and we should be concerned with that as a public policy issue.
My point was that when they talk about these bandwidth caps, if all they were doing is school, they would never hit the bandwidth.
Well, yeah, the bandwidth cap isn't about schoolwork. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
The bandwidth cap is about.
That's where I was going with the argument.
But I mean, like, this is the thing, right? Like, I mean, I crushed the bandwidth cap from Comcast last month. Like, I freaking blew it away. It was the first time. Usually, I come close and I back off, and then, but I was running this app that we've been testing to try and do a bunch of speed tests, and it turns out if you do 48 speed tests a day on a gigabit download connection, you use a lot of bandwidth. But like, I also do a ton of uploading. Most of those tests are happening during non-peak times. And as you know, as everyone on this call knows, every one of those bandwidth tests did not cost Comcast anything on non-peak times. Now, if I'm maxing that out during peak times, I am incurring some cost to Comcast. Pretty small for a provider the size of Comcast, but this is crap. The idea of a bandwidth cap is ridiculous in terms of the economics of how networks work. Go ahead, Kim.
Hey, Chris, if you didn't do those speed tests, you could have $45 internet. I'm just saying. That's the problem. You were
probably
everybody
in the whole city could probably have it. This is really bad. So.
I'm the bandwidth hog. I'm over here, and it's just for testing. Travis, I bet 5% of your internet bill as an ISP is the speed test servers off of yours.
I talked about this on the Starlink channels. You know, everyone would post their speed tests all the time. As soon as they put a bandwidth cap on there, I haven't seen one in days now.
Right.
So, but hang on, let's not promote this too far because I don't know about Kim, but I know we get a lot of subscribers because of that. Of not having a bandwidth cap. So I promote heavily that cable networks should have a bandwidth cap, at least in Minneapolis.
Here's your stump speech.
This
is what it is.
So yes, thank you for those 2.5 hours, Mr. Mitchell, and Mr. Thune. I think you did a wonderful
Travis,
job.
I think actually what we need is a Travis scale for like meetings that last more than an hour in terms of just how useless they are. You've watched like task force meetings. You've watched a variety of different meetings. Do you have any sense of where this hearing sits on your scale of uselessness?
Well, I guess it depends on what are you looking for. Are you looking for outcome? I think there'll be virtually nothing that comes from the meeting. As much as the people that on the panel were trying to, I don't think anything tangible comes from it. Because what I found interesting from the senators, and again, I'm a reasonably good, judge of character. They weren't even hardly paying attention, and they would cut the people off. They wouldn't listen to the whole thing they were trying to say. So I think that there's very little that comes of it. But they probably have these every day, I would assume, right?
No,
they bring in.
Well, they have a hearing like this every day, but on broadband, it's kind of rare.
Okay.
Doug, you look like you were going to say something.
No, I'm really enjoying it.
So I'm curious, Doug. I think the staffers. I think there's a bunch of staffers in DC who did pay attention and hopefully did learn something from some of the testimony. For the life of me, I cannot imagine a non-corrupt reason for why you would bring on the cable and telephone trade off on unions. You know exactly what they're going to say. It's almost comical in the absurdity of it. And
who else is going to build?
But to be fair, you know what everyone's going to say. You would know what Travis would say. You know what Utopia would say if you bring them up. You already know what their issues are.
Well, that's the question, Doug. If it was a panel of the four of us, do you think we would do any good, or would we just be dismissed as like kooks and irrelevant?
I don't know. They would probably call us whippersnappers or something. I don't know. I think they would. We could. Is it possible to be in contempt of Congress?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons.
3 minutes in, Chris would be ranting at the Congress.
Exactly.
I think I would be ineffective. I think Angela is far better for like the kind of ideas that I have. I'd rather have Angela up there than have me up there. Like, I don't think I would be very good at it, and I would be really annoyed.
Well,
I just would like you to sit next to Thune and see how long this lasts without you just like trying to like move over.
I would have a raw throat from all the snorting I was doing.
But Chris,
I think I would be pretty good at it, but no one pays attention to old hippie guys. So.
You have a tie-dye suit?
Yeah. Oh, we have to
I don't own a suit at all. What are you talking about?
Oh, hold on, we have to throw a suit up.
It would be customary, Travis.
Well, I'm not going then. I turned down the invitation, Mr. Thune. So, what was I going to say on that? Because I got myself laughing on that.
We can come back to it if you think about it. I wanted to throw out to Kim particularly a company called Ziply, which is the former assets of Frontier, mostly in the Northeast, which is doing some interesting stuff that I don't always get. Like, I'm not really sure what exactly they're doing. Like, they seem to be building fiber in some areas. They seem to have, like, I don't know where the business plan is and whatnot. Now they bought iFiber, which was a really interesting ISP that operate on a bunch of open access networks, although not on UTOPIA. iFiber kind of tried to go big nationally, and then I think had some stumbling in Medina, Ohio, with that project, where I think they had higher expectations, and then iFiber's leadership changed. But this is interesting because this is a big, like, kind of ILEC company, Ziply, that's buying a company that mostly exists on open access networks, the kind of company that Travis says has no real value because it doesn't have any assets in the ground. And so I'm trying to parse what's going on here, and I don't really get it.
I actually understand.
Yeah.
You got to remember, in Washington State, there's gigantic open access networks up there. And that's their only way to get into those. They're not going to go. There's several counties who have built the entire county with fiber. In fact, iFiber is mostly in Grant and Chelan counties, which are almost completely built out. That's how you get to everybody. So it was a very smart purchase because that lets them provide fiber to all those customers who are on DSL. So I think, so they're actually buying into, they're never going to overbuild those. No one comes to a rural area and builds a second network. So, because these are rural fiber networks, they're a very rare thing. So.
But I think this is the problem, Doug. It's private equity. So it goes back to what Travis has said, and we've all said along, are these private equity firms going to come in and just buy up all the smaller ISPs to eventually become the monopoly and not really be true open access? I don't know, but I mean, it'll be
those kind of networks, if they bought the two largest residential providers, they would be the monopoly.
But let's play this out, right? So iFiber
is a possibility. So,
these open access networks, and I do not have access to the numbers. I may have looked at some numbers that were publicly available years ago, but I haven't refreshed myself. But I suspect that iFiber was the biggest provider on those networks. Let's assume for a second that iFiber had 50% of the residential providers on both of those big networks in Grant County and Chelan County. The whole point of private equity, I would think, is that you're being able to make this investment. You're going to be able to jack up prices in the future, but there's 15 other ISPs on those networks, and there's very low switching costs. So if iFiber
in Washington, there's not 15 other ISPs. It's not like Utopia. There's maybe 2 or 3 residential ISPs.
That's not what I saw when I saw the listing.
It's a whole lot of business ISPs.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's play that out then. So, Travis Mitchell Internet jumps on out there, and it's pretty low cost to just create a new ISP. You're talking about these communities where there's word of mouth. It's not. I don't see, like, I don't know how much they paid for iFiber, but I got to think they don't have the kind of lock-in they do when they're taking on big market share elsewhere. It's going to be easy for people to switch away over time, I would think.
They didn't buy this for the terminal value. They bought this for the customer count. I mean, that's what they bought it for. They have a footprint, and they want to serve as many of them as possible because that helps them elsewhere. From a policy perspective, to try to serve everybody is a very positive thing. They are an incumbent.
So I mean, this brings in what, like a few bucks per subscriber per month?
Yeah, it's not profitable. It makes a little bit of money, but it's okay money. I mean, all the ISPs on the Utopia make money. They don't make a fortune, but they make money. So.
Okay. Any
They're not
questions
living
from
in the
Travis?
mansion that Travis is. But I think this is like, if you look at
What I do?
I'm just joking. If you look, I did a good Wikipedia search on Ziply, so this is totally accurate. So I'm never going to be wrong. But
I'm glad I edited that story earlier today.
Didn't Ziply, from what I read, was formed in 2020. So in 2020, and they're saying that because they bought all the Frontier assets, they're up to 500,000 customers. So are they just trying to increase their valuation of the company more than they are trying to?
They're trying to increase customer
yeah.
counts.
Because they're losing. I assume that they're losing customers at the same rate. Like they have fiber, they're gaining customers, and they have DSL where they're losing customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So do we know what they paid for it?
No clue. No.
So here's the standard kind of playbook for private equity. You basically you pay some multiple of EBITDA today. There's a growth pattern for 5 to 7 years. That's usually your capital hold, and then you flip it off to another private equity group. So I'm assuming that's all this is. I'm guaranteed they didn't pay much for it. They might have paid 4 times EBITDA for it, versus Utopia can probably sell for 28 times EBITDA because they own the physical infrastructure. That's when I say there's no money in it. There's no money in riding the network. The money is in owning the network.
Right.
I mean,
and I think
you can have a nice life and you can have a nice business and all that. I'm just saying if you're trying to sell off to private equity, I'm actually kind of surprised that unless they got it for a song.
Well, that's what I wonder about. I suspect there may have been in the Chris's musings category. We need a new banner. That iFiber, when it was trying to go big and use a big national play in hoping there would be a lot more open access, they think they brought on investors saying we're going to be operating on this much, and those investors may have gotten tired and wanted to get out.
Well, also remember there's a lot of private equity looking for deals right now. So there's going to be deals that we see in 2023 that may not make sense to all of us, but there's just not a lot to choose from right now. And if you're running an infrastructure fund, things like this might be the things they can get their hands on.
And just so you know, if you're a consultant right now, you get calls from infrastructure funds 3 times a week wanting to understand broadband.
Oh yeah,
and they want to understand the whole industry in 1 hour.
Well, and the problem is with the Fed rate right now going through the roof, it's almost impossible. I think most of these networks will be PE driven moving for the next few years, because getting senior debt, even getting mezz debt now, is literally impossible for upstarts.
We should do some kind of community networking thing that would try to make sure the network stays rooted in the community. I don't know, Kim, am I crazy?
Well, we should pass a law in the city that Travis can never sell his network. That's easy.
First of all, I do want to mention that, Doug, you just have to tell those people who are calling who want to know about broadband that there's a Senate hearing about 2.5 hours that they can learn all about broadband. All they gotta do is watch it. Good point. That's the first solution. I speak about this all the time. If a city is going to put investment into building a broadband network, they can partner with whoever they want to, but own the asset. Don't give away the asset to somebody else. If it's your taxpayers' money that's going into the ground, own it, at least doing it from that way. If it's private companies coming in, totally different story if they're using their capital to build it. But you own the network that you're using your people, your residents, taxpayers' dollars on.
So second or third week in a row where I had to take my Princess Leia ears off because in the middle of a Travis comment, they just stopped working. I don't know. It seems like it's always a Travis comment. Rye also dug around and said that iFiber has 18,000 subs, which would suggest that it has well less than 50% of the market share in Chelan and Grant, because both of those counties have more than 100,000 people, which I would assume a significant number of them are on the fiber.
Yes.
This is a question that Travis has requested to go last on. And this is some of the conversations I've been having with different folks in the current environment. We have a number of people, often in more rural areas, perhaps some areas of mixed density, where they feel like they need to build their own internet access, and it may not be a municipal network. And so I just came up with a number that was too low to really do much with. But I'm curious what you would do, Kim, if I said for the next 6 months, I need you to figure out how to help this community out. You have on the order of $1 million What do you do to try to help get a rural community well connected?
First of all, you have to see if there's any connectivity that you can tie into, and then I would build to their anchor institutions in those small communities, like their library, their city hall, some of the really crux places in the little community, and then from there you could figure out a way to build out years later. But that would be my first, to see if there's any way to interconnect to one of the major routes, and then just connect those areas. What do you like? How do you like that answer, Chris? How do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, if you had one of those. If you had one of those BTOP networks nearby, that would be handy. Go ahead, Doug.
The second answer, which a lot of communities are pulling off, because this is what they're doing with ARPA money, is they are making local grants to partner ISPs. And that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but that's enough to get them to come and build. And so they're getting, and mostly they're giving them to co-ops and small telcos. And so they're saying, look, if I give you $1 million, will you build my county? And it's working. People are taking, they're going like, well, I was already looking at it and that's enough to change my mind. So that's a second option. Just depends where you're at. I mean, depends where you're at. So yeah.
He didn't give us a location, Doug.
No,
he just said where.
He always does that. I think that next he's going to ask us what we think about Thune. So I don't know.
Travis, you're on a small island on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Travis. You wanted to go last.
Oh. Okay. So $1 million, huh? Wasn't there a? Yeah, exactly. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. All right. So here's my questions for you, because I'm going to answer your question with a question. Can I lever that? Can I put additional? Can I use that money to put additional debt on the business?
Can you build a capital stack?
Ooh, look at you, Mr. Fancy Pants. Okay. And who's liable for it? Am I liable for the capital stack, or is this new entity? Is it backstopped by taxpayers? Because these are a lot of the questions. I mean, my basic answer is take the $1 million, do a feasibility study, and then run out of $1 million. Okay, but I'm saying if you really wanted to do it, that doesn't work. So how is it a grant? I don't have to pay it back, and can I use it? Because here's the problem. Like we get this in Wisconsin, these $1 million grants. A bank won't underwrite it. Additional debt. They won't put additional turns of debt on it. And $1 million is not enough to move the needle hardly at all. So it's a question with a lot of questions.
Right.
Well, I have one partial answer for you.
Yep.
Most of the people looking to do this are counties. Counties almost cannot afford to do this. Counties have a very, very hard time borrowing for stuff like this because they just don't have the financial wherewithal. Counties don't have a big revenue stream.
Unless they're in California.
Yeah, that doesn't count, but yes.
No, but I mean, like it doesn't count because California deliberately created a structure to help counties deal with this in terms of that pooled debt. What's it called? There's a fancy name for it. The
loan loss reserve. The
Loan Loss Reserve Fund. Thank you. Yeah. Where so counties can basically come up with a business plan, and then if their business plan is not successful, California has created a pool of $1 billion or $500 million, something that takes the first loss to try to give investors some a reason to be a part of those projects, right? I mean, that's more or less the incentive, I think.
Yep.
And how do you navigate through all that?
Oh, you don't.
You hire Tom Kogrick from KeyBank.
Once you're short, you hire lawyers and then eat your money 11 years later.
Yeah, I mean, geez Louise, these people. Here's the problem: $1 million isn't enough. So
and that's why I picked $1 million.
Somebody's gonna have to pony up the rest. And what does that person that ponies up the rest get? So, if you're if you're like a high net worth individual and you're willing to take on the liability, $1 million. You never walk away from $1 million worth of equity. But if you're starting up a grassroots cooperative effort and you don't have the ability to borrow from senior lenders, you're going to flame out pretty quick because you're not going to be able to build enough subscribers to generate enough revenue to even pay one person to work the deal.
And this is where I feel like, $1 million isn't enough. I agree. To some extent, like you'd want to, if you were able to parlay that into more and enough, depending on the size of the area, I would think you would consider going after a business model where you would build fiber to towers, and then, whether you're using Tirana or whether you're using other wireless technologies, you give people a taste of good service if you're in a terrain that will support it, and then you try to build that business case where over the few years you're building that fiber out with some of that revenue, I'm guessing. But the challenge in some ways is that, like, if you can't do it, maybe someone else is going to get state dollars to do it in that area. And so it's kind of an interesting situation right now that I was wrestling with some of the folks that we hope are building these local networks may find that the BEAD program, if it ever writes checks out to build networks, will actually make things harder for them because they don't qualify for it, or they can't deal with the paperwork. And so they actually don't have much of a path forward. It's kind of bleak.
Well, and here's my experience, and I think this is pretty universal from what I can see, unless you're in some really difficult terrain, but it takes about $15 million to be EBITDA positive. So and that's with half of it coming from grants. So somebody has to back the $7.5 million you're going to borrow to make that a reality. But you can get to EBITDA positive. Absolutely. It's just going to take a lot more than $1 million. So with $1 million, I'd hire Doug Dawson, do a feasibility study, so he could turn around and tell us you need to raise $15 million. That's what I would do.
I'm all in favor of this.
Yeah.
I'd like to do 20 of these. That'd be great.
So that's where I asked Mr. Thune if he gave us $100 million out of his $45 billion, we would be the most successful project in the country.
No, Travis, because Senator Thune would tell you that a telephone company that contributes to his campaign and to the Republican National Committee already provides DSL to 4 people in that town, and therefore there is no need for a duplicative overbuilding network.
This is why I remember what I was going to say earlier. You realize the vast majority of these underserved areas will be served by the incumbent in that area.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's true. Like, I still don't, like, if we're talking about areas where you have like 2 or 3 people per linear mile, 2 or 3 residents per linear mile, is AT&T going to go for that money? That's what's the point, Doug, at which you expect AT&T to really back off, or Charter in North Carolina? Is Charter going all the way out there and doing this, or are they just trying to pick off the nicer areas?
So far, they got RDOF money in counties that make absolutely no sense. So they seem to be going for it.
So we're just confused by that.
But if AT&T,
I'm highly confused by it. Yeah. So
who's going to do it? You think there's going to be somebody that's going to start a grassroots effort in that town to serve 2 people?
No, I don't know if it's going to be a grassroots effort, but I think electric co-ops are going to be doing a big part of it where they exist. I think
they're all financially driven, though, dude. They're going to look at it and go, the math doesn't make sense.
No, but this is where I think the math is different for an electric co-op, where the real risk to an electric co-op is losing electric demand. And so for them, they need to make sure that sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because my son, who is ill, is moving around a little bit. I want to make sure it's not an emergency. The electric co-op's biggest fear is that they lose more population and industry, and so they want these broadband efforts to break even. But frankly, if you tell an electric co-op, if you only lose a few $100,000 a year, and that will guarantee you $1 million worth of electricity sales for them, and I'm just making these numbers up, but there's a balancing act there where they're like, heck, that's a great deal. I was just talking to Ernie Staten, who runs the Fairlawn Fiber Network in Akron area. He uses different economics than you do, Travis, because he runs the city. And so they put municipal money into building that fiber network, and they offer it at a reasonable price point. And one of the things it's done is it's led to more people wanting to live there and more business, to the extent that the city's tax intake, despite the fact they haven't raised taxes, has significantly increased. The tax base has grown significantly. And so even if they're losing money on broadband, they are massively benefiting the community because they're growing the tax base with it. And that's where the local governments and co-ops think a little bit differently about this, because of how it's not just the broadband picture, it's a wider picture.
That's a really good story there. The value of one person moving to your town is way more than the cost of bringing fiber to them. Yes, absolutely.
So what is municipal money? Is that a fancy term for tax dollars?
That's tax-free money.
Well, no, it could. So I say that because there's a variety of things that can drive that, from transfers to property taxes. And in Ohio, the property taxes don't go as much to local government, I think. And so it's so complicated, but it's a variety of tax and tax-like things, I think.
But Travis, if they take bond money out to build this and the network never fails, they don't use a penny of tax money. So
if it doesn't fail, yeah.
If it doesn't fail.
Yeah, and most of them don't. Go ahead, Kim, you were saying something.
I was just going to say, but the ROI is very different for a municipality or a co-op versus what Travis is ROI, I assume is. So you're just looking at two different business models and why somebody might go into those rural areas, because a business model that a municipality might have might be 10 to 15 years, where Travis on his return on investment can't wait 15 years for that area to make money.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you can't forget economy of scale either. If a co-op doubles its size, its overheads are still the same, and then all their older customers are more profitable. There's a whole bunch of complicated parts of it.
So question about why Comcast has introduced 10 gigabit to Salt Lake City. Looks like 2 gigs down, much faster upload. Why are they doing it in Salt Lake City first?
It's because I live here. Why? I think it just brings back the point of competition. I do want to thank Mike. I mean, I know Mike is a customer of Utopia. First of all, Utopia is always uppercase because it's an acronym for those who don't know. So I do appreciate the totally making it capitalized. I think this just goes into Comcast is in an area where it's not just Utopia Fiber. It's not just Google Fiber. There is a lot of competition in a lot of these cities who are choosing to build their own network or partner with other ISPs in the state of Utah. You are seeing a very highly competitive market in the Wasatch Front, which is the 200-mile corridor here in Utah that has, I think it's somewhere 80 to 90% of the population. So it is just a very educated base, and Comcast wants to. Why wouldn't you? If you're going to try it, why wouldn't you try it in Utah, where you're seeing all of this competition to see if it plays? Yep. Is my inkling.
Doug, I feel like sometimes these things are chosen for the reasons Kim cited, but it might also just be that they have some local techs. I think they rotate around these things. St. Paul, Minneapolis were among the first places to get DOCSIS 3 from Comcast, but we're not competitive. There's no competition here. I should say, Travis, there was no competition then in most of anywhere. And even today, there's no competition in most places outside of Minneapolis to speak of.
I've never figured out the big cable companies' decisions of where to go. They have to have a matrix of decision making that none of us understand. Except recently they decided to upgrade Philadelphia because that's their headquarters city. But because it's not a good city to upgrade. It's always a mystery, and I'm sure there's a good reason. I think they always, they do a lot of trials. We always forget that thing in Salt Lake City is a trial. They may never do it again anywhere else, or they may do it a whole bunch of places after they look at it. So,
So Doug, you had your story of the year that we'll talk about some of that as we were wrapping out. One of the things you're going to contribute is that not much happened in a particular area.
Well, yeah, it's been 1 year since they announced $45 billion of BEAD grants, and if you put it on the time scale of 1 to 10 of all the events that have to be done, we're still somewhere north of between event 1 and 2.
Well,
there's still a whole lot to be done before we can actually put grants out the door. We're not there. They didn't make a lot of progress on the timeline yet.
But we got maps. Nobody thought we would get maps.
No,
I'm feeling ill.
No, we don't have maps. And I'm starting to hear that there's a lot of state attorney generals talking about suing over the maps. And if that happens, we're not going to get BEAD grants for 2 years.
Well, the Texas controller, I believe it was, my colleague Deanne will probably correct me in the chat if she's still around. I believe is pushing now for a legal proceeding to demand an extra 2 months to fix the maps, which I think is entirely reasonable. And this comes back to something we've talked about, and I think we've all agreed on, which is NTIA is really screwing this up. NTIA should be rushing out a small amount of money. It generally knows how much each state is going to get, even if it doesn't know the round figure. It could absolutely say that Texas is going to get $500 million because we think Texas is going to get between $3.5 and $4.5 billion. It can do initial allocations without knowing what the map is and give us time to have a map that might be slightly better than atrocious.
If you would have done that a little louder, that would have been 4. So
I was right on the edge. I was just walking.
You were close. No, the maps are just, that's the nightmare story of the year. This is the disaster of the last decade. Maps. They're just they're so bad that you can't even put I can't put an adjective on it or an adverb. They're terrible. So.
Yeah, and we still, I mean, we're fighting about maps again, using our energy on maps again that don't have any pricing information. We've made so little progress, and I'll just once again thank the Senate and the Biden administration for not getting a commissioner on, putting forth one of the best nominations for the FCC that I can remember, Gigi Sohn, and then just letting her dangle out there and not doing anything to actually get the FCC working.
Have you ever heard what? Because obviously there's at least one Democrat, maybe multiple, who are ready to vote for her. Do we know who that is?
Yeah, now, I'll say, first of all, I don't think Chuck Schumer is all that motivated to move it forward. Gigi Sohn has upset Hollywood because she does not think Hollywood should write the copyright rules for the entire world based on its interests without a balancing anywhere else. I'm getting close to that rant again. Well
done, Doug.
Chuck Schumer is not like super thrilled about it, but I believe I think there's a number of suggestions I've heard that Senator Cortez Masto is on the fence. But there was also a time where it's looked like there was 50 votes for her, and then we had like COVID and strokes, and there was just never enough time. And this is where I feel like we're not a serious republic. We're not a serious country when we can't get things done because like someone is ill. Like we can't have a vote when someone's ill. What? Like, I'm really glad Japan didn't bomb the Pearl Harbor while people were freaking ill. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, why can't the Senate have remote voting? Here they are talking about broadband, and they can't vote remotely. It's not hard to prove who they are.
Yeah,
we can't. We can't even do voting remotely in the states, Doug. So why do you think we can do it in the Senate?
But like, this gets back to like, I feel like one of the things I wanted to say about Senator Thune and others is that like, I don't like. There's times when I've been at events and people are like, do you want to meet so-and-so senator? And I'm like, no, like, what am I going to say to a senator? Like, what do I care? Like, can I talk to their staffer that actually makes positions on this and does the work on it? That's who I want to talk to. Like, I don't like these. It's just, that's not how things are done. The senators are important. They do, like, they lead their offices. They set a tone, blah, blah, blah. But like on many of these issues, it's the staffers that matter.
It's the staff. Mm-hmm. It's the staff. Yes. Yep.
So was that number 4?
No, it was close.
Okay,
I've got a bunch of decimals here that are adding up.
Kim, you're up.
Yeah, it's your go for 4. Yeah. Come on, Kim.
Yeah, I don't think I can irritate him like as much as you guys can, unless I say something like AT&T, Comcast, Charter. Everybody is like that they're Chris's favorite in cable providers. I don't think I can do anything because he seems to love all of those companies.
He does. He does have a special place in his heart.
I have a deep appreciation. I feel like Juan might have some very good reasons for why we shouldn't just decide that because Chris thinks there's 50 votes, we should have something happening. It's probably a good point, Juan.
But do you think so? Going back to that, do we think that she is going to even get up for like that? They're going to put her up for a vote? I mean, do you think she's going to make it across the finish line in 2023?
Well, the issue, I mean, so as someone who is not paid to follow this closely, but is obsessive about too many dumb things, there's a lot of things on the calendar that have to get done before the new Congress comes in, because the new Congress will likely have, we don't know if there's going to be enough votes to, like, who the Speaker of the House will be, but the person that looks like will be the Speaker of the House is a clown who probably will not be able to actually get anything done. And so things like the FCC having the ability to do auctions and deal with the 3.1 to 3.45. Is that right, Doug? How high does it go? That band?
That's close enough.
We're hoping that'll get auctioned off at some point, but the FCC needs a reauthorization of its auction. There's a bunch of things like the defense bill, like there's all these things, actually making sure that our freaking elections work and that nobody thinks the vice president can just decide to not have the president get elected. Like, like there's all kinds of things that need to get done because we expect that Congress will not work for the next 2 years because the Speaker of the House and a Republican Party that is just interested in being on TV rather than actually getting anything done. And I'm not saying that because I think the Democrats are going to be freaking great on all these issues, but just it's a clown show. And so there's a bunch of things that have to happen. And the question is, do you wait until after the new Senate comes in to then push Gigi through, or do you use some of that precious time now to get her through? And I would say get her through. We freaking need her.
We made it, guys. We made it to number 4.
You did it. Yes. Congratulations. I knew you could do it. You took the
we just had to pivot a little bit.
Well,
to
you
get
took
back
the
to it.
60 shows, and now it's just the Chris show, and the rest of you are just here to like push buttons.
Well, I mean, was that officially 4?
Oh,
I feel like that was 4.
Oh,
I feel like the
3.
high pitch. The high pitch
right.
at the end.
I think it's time we go full nuclear with Chris. and I think we're starting to see the fruits of the fabulous Trump FCC and the allocation of the 6 gigahertz spectrum that will be starting to become available here in 2023. Well done, Trump FCC. Take it away.
Actually, that was the best thing the FCC's done in a long time. That was actually.
Come on, I'm trying to drop the big nuke on Chris here.
Travis, that button got worn out, and I'm afraid.
I got to come up with a new one. That was my.
You have to come up with a new one because he actually likes the bandwidth. So.
Yeah,
that's one of 3 things that I think Ajit Pai did that I think were wise decisions.
Wow, there's more. I can't even think of number 2, but that's
so number 2. The tribal priority window is tremendous, and I don't know many people that would have pushed that through. Now he did limit it to rural areas, and there are urban places where we could have seen tribes really having some benefits, but that was pretty significant. There was a third one that I'm forgetting now. Oh, I think some of the stuff about China was needed, and so that's good. The first time we launched this show, we had Carl Bodie as a guest, and for years, Carl Bodie has been on a high horse about a number of things. One of them is that Elon Musk is a clown, and I feel like I've long thought that Elon Musk had a bunch of talents that people were neglecting to appreciate, and that just because he was a weird guy that people didn't understand it. And now I don't know, like it's hard to justify now every day. It gets a little bit harder, but Carl's like the person who's been ranting about all the stuff about how TikTok, all the people ranting about TikTok need to shut up and actually focus on like privacy legislation that would protect all of all of the predations of those companies, not just the government of China. And I think he's been right about that.
Yeah, does TikTok do any more with their data than Google? Come on, let's get serious here.
I mean, I think that's Carl's argument, and that's where I chafe, because I do feel like I don't think Google is going to be committing genocide against the Uyghurs. And I worry about China's ambitions to.
That's mostly because they're not a country.
Right. It's mostly, but I worry about China's ambitions to like have totalitarian countries. I worry about what the NBA and Delta have done to roll back, to change the way that they communicate about things to please China. I worry deeply about what Elon Musk will do with Twitter to make sure he can keep his factories operating and selling cars in China. Like, I worry a lot about China. I feel like some people don't appreciate that. But that said, a lot of the people who are yelling about China, won't do anything about Facebook or Google or the others, so they should. Go ahead, Kim.
He almost talked himself into 5 without.
He almost talked himself. I'm more upset about like I found out right before this podcast is that Elon Musk shut down the Twitter account that followed his personal jet everywhere, that tracked his personal jet.
Because he's all for free speech, right?
Yeah.
But that was my biggest concern of the day, so I just wanted to bring it up at the end of the year show that we can no longer track his jet.
Here's something that I cannot get enough of.
I'm sure they have it on Facebook.
I'm curious if you react the same way. I love reading the stories, often on Light Reading or Telecompetitor. The most recent headline here, operators say 5G investments show no clear signs of paying off. I can't get enough of these stories. Like, after years of us talking about 5G hype and what a loser it was, to see story after story of like other people finally realizing that is nice.
Well, and then I woke up this morning and Pots and Pans was all about 6G. So here we go again, right? Yeah.
Which
Here
is
we go.
which is the old 5G. They just renamed it.
Yeah. But I was watching the Cambium conversation on their 4500 platform that's in the 6 gigahertz spectrum, and to have 800 megahertz available, wow, what a game changer for WISPs out there. Uh-oh, we lose
Chris
Mitchell?
disappeared
Again?
I
Huh?
believe we did.
No, I'm here. I was just checking in with a little guy who's not feeling great. Travis, I sorry I missed your point.
No, I was just talking about there's going to be a combination of 5G, 6G, and this whole products that are releasing next year with 800 megahertz available in the 6 gigahertz band. Game changer for WISPs. So it'll be an interesting year ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I'm hearing that NTIA, some of the NTIA staffers basically spend their day receiving rant after rant about the injustice of the rules that say that unlicensed connections are per se not broadband.
No, I would agree. That's 50% of all their emails.
Who's this now?
Oh yeah,
The people are responsible
and all their members. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is, I feel like this gets down to the challenge between supporting bright line rules that are clear but also have clearly unjust lines that are included in them, and having more complicated rules that then we complain that there's too many rules and that that it's too complicated. It's very hard to get this just right. Oh, Wi-Fi 7 at $1,500 a router.
Holy smokes! That's what I was just looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out like how to upgrade some of my home stuff, and I still just can't find anything more than a gig that's really affordable that I could justify. Hoping that next year will be the year where we see that. I do think that our first show of January, I hope to do some forecasting and that sort of a thing.
I'm pretty sure, if I recall what Senator Thune said, you could buy a gigabit for $45. Is that right, Travis?
Hey, I'm telling you, I still want Thune to invite the four of us out there and give us $100 million. We'll build MitchellNet, and it'll be the wildly so 45,900 million will go to waste, but 100 million will go to good use.
Do you think that one of the big stories of this year in retrospect, I'm asking Doug first, I think AT&T building out of market fiber in Mesa, and perhaps rumors of elsewhere?
They've actually been building out a network. This is the first big place. See, AT&T goes to all their little hubs, and that could be a cellular hub in other cities where they're not the ISP, and they build 15 houses. They've been doing that. That's how they got their 20 million passings. They're all 20 at a time. This is the first.
So you're saying,
this is their,
just to interrupt you for a second,
big network. Yes.
So you're saying that in areas where they are not the ILEC, where they are not the incumbent, they are building the cell sites and they are connecting residential homes on a onesie twosie
tiny
way.
little onesie twosie ways, and they've been doing it for about 4 years. But no one notices them. They don't advertise. They knock on doors. Is how they sell it. But this is the first place where they're doing something big. Is that why
I get great AT&T service in the middle of nowhere on my cell phone? Is because they're building up to all those little rural places. I think, Chris, the story isn't that AT&T is building. I think we've always, at least I've known that. I think the biggest story is why Mesa. Why did they jump into that show of like Google Fiber, Sci-Fi, and all of the other people who are building? But why Mesa? What's so important to that market?
And that's the big question mark. That seems like over competition. Mesa is a community of fairly older people. It's like, really? That's of all the places in the United States, that's the place. So,
yeah, that might be a case of overbuilding, because you're talking about 4 or 5 fiber networks going in at once. That's remarkable.
Yeah. So that's the mystery there. Yes.
Travis, just go into Mesa. I heard it's a good market to build a fiber network.
You know what's funny? I'm trying to remember, but I swear Mesa was the pilot area for when municipal Wi-Fi was a big thing back in like 2007. I swear we went to Mesa to visit their network. So there must be something about Mesa that really attracts all this first generation tech.
I think it's no trees and a lot of fast growing areas.
Rapid growth, sandy soil, all the good things.
Yeah, if you want to really have some fun over this holiday break, Kim, who's getting ready for that right now.
It's ginger beer, folks.
I know what it is, but it's more fun to make innuendo. Check out a guy named Chuck Marone. I think it's Small Towns, and he has an argument that that suburbs are a Ponzi scheme. And I think it's a pretty strong argument that basically these are not long-term sustainable in terms of the tax revenue to sustain the hardcore infrastructure. But when they're building, it sure is nice to get in there and take advantage of those things when they're sprouting up. Strong towns. Thank you, Jay. Strong towns. Wonderful, insightful thinking that goes counter to a lot of urban planning and things like that. But
I've always
actually
said that.
Sharp.
What does a subdivision look like when it's 75 years old and all the houses are falling over because they weren't built very well? So
yeah. And they don't generate enough tax base to keep the road up to speed.
Right.
What does a broadband network look like when it was built cheaply and inefficiently in the beginning?
Well, those get them because they put it in and the roads are open.
Do you have to rebuild them then?
No, not if they put conduit in. So
you almost baited me into like picking on one of the ISPs that I love to pick on, but they're a bit litigious, so I'm not gonna.
I'm sorry, Travis. I interrupted your rant.
I'm trying to get him going again, and he's not taking.
Hey, calm down. Juan has a question for me. Yes, Juan. 10 gig. We offer 10 gig to every residential house. We should be having an announcement about that coming up soon. So stay tuned, Juan and Mike, and anybody else of our 2 other followers who are on here.
Yeah. I'm deeply curious about the CPE. I agree with Juan. Like, I can't justify that. I'd paid, I want to say like on the order of $250, $300 for my 3.1 DOCSIS router that I own. And now I get emails from Comcast every other week telling me that I can't take full advantage, despite the fact that it's like, what is it, 32 by 32, or is it 32 by, what is that? What is it? How do the channels work? Whatever I got was sort of like one that was very flexible, but does max out at a gig, I think.
Oh, they can support your router. They just choose not to.
Oh, well, terrific.
Right? Yes.
Travis?
No, they will not put it. They say it's a software issue. So, yes.
So here goes rant number 6 today. They kept asking in this Senate thing. They used a word that I don't know if we've actually defined. What is considered affordable in broadband? It's really hard to solve a problem if we don't have the definition of what affordable is. Is affordable free?
Nope. Well, it would be in some ways, but that's not what people are saying when they use the word affordable.
Any idea what people are saying?
Well, I think it is different in different circumstances, and I'll issue a quick take and see what Kim and Doug say. But I'll just note that, like, if you're in a rural area where you're paying more than $100 a month for a really terrible HughesNet connection, a $70 a month 100 megabit connection looks more affordable. Certainly anything that's in the $30 to $40 range now after ACP is applied, I think that's in the affordable range. I feel like for areas of high poverty where you got $75 a month bills, I think that's edging out of affordable. But there's a big gray zone there that I would say.
Now, Pew did a survey, a large one, 20-some thousand folks, and they said that 60% of folks who can't afford broadband will not pay more than 0. So the folks who say they can't afford it, that's the number they're looking for. So.
Yeah, and I always worry about. I'm just saying, I didn't really buy that number. My experience is not that high, but there are still quite a few folks like that, which means it's $30 and you get the ACP. But yeah, that's hard to believe. But I'm not sure that the folks who don't have broadband can't afford it know enough to answer the question. So who knows? So
I was just curious. They threw that word around like it had an actual definition. And I was wondering what it was. So.
I just spotlighted Kim to force her to answer it.
I think it's anywhere from $50 to $75. I view as affordable. But I do think it's a fluid answer depending on where you are in the country and what affordable means to different sectors. Affordable in, a place in High Michigan versus, Southern California, that affordable could mean very two different things. So I think it is a fluid answer or a fluid question, and it can go back and forth wherever you are. So I think it's interesting they use that term, Travis, as a generality of that there's one number that we're all striving to hit, because as you mentioned, we're hitting $100 internet, but then they're like, we need it affordable. It's contradicting itself.
Well, affordable is the price that Sonic charges in one of the most expensive markets in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, his prices are unbelievably low.
But isn't he predominantly wireless?
No,
Sonic is. Who's the
Sonic,
rooftop guy? I thought that was Sonic.
No.
Oh, okay.
That's Monkey Brains and prior to that Common.
Oh, okay, so I got them backwards. Okay.
Yes.
And I think also this is situational. You could take a person in, let's just say Southwest Georgia, who's living on fixed income, and it's not affordable for them to pay after the ACP $30 a month. You put a grandchild in that home that's 12 years old, and it becomes affordable, right? Because priorities change to make sure that child can do their homework, even if they use that connection much more for video gaming, to come back to one of Travis's earlier points. But that's why I say it's situational. It could change quite a bit.
Are you trying to get Travis to rant? Was that what that was?
Nah,
Travis wants everyone to be connected. This is the thing, right? I mean,
I like that, but I like sustainable networks, and that's my big worry on all these things. And they kept talking about this. Well, okay, so you're going to throw all this money at us, but then how are we going to operate the network? It's like, well, hold on. With all this money, you should be building a network that you can operate. And and that's not the way these people were thinking. They were thinking there was going to continue to be on the drip forever.
Yeah, no, and that's because the big cable and telephone companies, they want to figure out how to unlock the taxpayer dollars to be on the drip forever, if they can possibly justify it. The telephone companies have been on the drip forever, right? I mean, that's how we built the telephone system to areas. The cable companies had monopolies for a long time that made sure that they would be able to cover their costs. And then they had a competitive environment, but we've never really had actual competition because they had that massive advantage from that early monopoly. So there's no possibility of a free market system in telecom, I would say.
Well, here's my brave prediction then. I'm gonna preempt our next show. The RDOF, there's supposed to be another round, but because of all the B grant money, they probably won't have anywhere to give it. I believe they'll just do a big subsidy program and give it all to the ILECs, the big ILECs. Yes.
And I mean,
it'll be CAF 3, it'll be CAF 2 on steroids.
Right, and I feel like Frontier and like whatever company's not Lumen a half of CenturyLink, I forget what's their bright blah blah.
Right. Yes, that's them. Yes.
They right blah blah. They're the ones forming that program, right, to make sure that they can get it. Although where we need it is like those networks in North Dakota and South Dakota where you got the 2 hours of windshield time to get to the customer. We need it in tribal areas where the tribes are building their own ISPs because nobody else has, and they have 75 customers, and you're not going to get those 15 million that Travis is talking about to get EBITDA positive. So there are places where we need to do that, but it's unfortunately
those places have no lobbying power.
Yeah, that's where we would have gone with that. So that's perfect. Exactly. Yes. So I feel like I want to drag this out until the new year, but I'm afraid that we'll get Jay and Juan and Tom, and if Mike's still around, I'm sure he's about to comment that he is. We're going to drive them all away. So I'm hoping that we'll be back the first week of January, but we will be back in January. I don't think we'll be back before then, unless something really crazy happens. I would say that, because
what if she gets nominated? Are we coming back this year?
If Gigi goes.
Oh, what if they vote her in next week? Are we going to come back?
If something really big happens, then I think that then we'll see if we want to come back and do a special show. Kim, did you have any news you wanted to share about your own personal achievements lately? Is that public yet?
I think it's going to be. I think it's been public. But last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't know what day it is, I was very humbled and grateful to be voted onto the Fiber Broadband Association Board of Directors. So I will be doing that in all of my free time as well, Travis. So thank you. Travis is going to be like, when do you sleep?
Wow, that's impressive.
This means she
And
gets to
big.
go to even a few more conferences.
Yeah.
I like to, this house of mine, I just don't like to see it enough.
The
So, yes.
the Juan's comment, I'll just note, I think is worth spending a minute on too. And I'm curious how Travis, Kim, and Doug all react to my reaction to this, which is that last week we did a tribal broadband boot camp. It was our 4th one of the year, our 5th one overall. It's been a remarkable year in that a year ago we did not know if we were going to be doing 1 or 2 more or whatever. We did 4. We've had tremendous support. The Schmidt Futures Foundation allowed us to expand those, as well as some other foundations that kicked in help. The organization Connect Humanity really stepped up to make sure we could do this. And in that discussion, we bring in different people that have expertise. And one of the people that was talking about networks that they had built had talked about how they had built this network and they didn't build to some of the areas where there wasn't demand. As Juan notes, some people don't want internet access. And then that person died and someone bought the house who wanted internet access. And like, that's the direction we're going in. And they were saying in that case that they actually would have saved money if they had just built the network to begin with. And rather than having to like come back out and re-engineer it and bring the crews back and all this stuff. So this is a question of whether, in 10 years, is everyone going to be on it? And it's hard for me to imagine that there's going to be more than a few people that are just still passing this up in the future.
The problem is not going to be rural. The problem is going to be cities. There's still a lot of folks in cities with problems. So we keep ignoring that. So, yeah.
Yep. Any other reactions? Reaction doubt?
You can't get a rise out of us. We're only here to get a rise out of you.
But I will say Juan is right with, if you want to switch gears, he's right with his comment there.
But we do about 25 to 30 surveys a year. We find 2 to 3% of people in every community prefer cell phones. There are folks that's what they want, which is great for them. So
yeah. And I'm a fan of municipal and cooperative networks, but I've always believed if we truly believe in the internet, we need overlapping networks. The people who want to figure out, there are some people who think we should have one government-owned network that runs on an open access basis and it should be perfectly engineered. And I always think that's not a good idea. We should have overlapping networks.
It would be okay if they put Senator Thin in charge of it.
Amen. Amen. I'm moving to South Dakota. The good folks of South Dakota. No, it's, what, you say what you want though, but he asked great questions. So
that was not my experience.
Here he goes again. That's how we're going to end this show. This is how we're going to end the show.
I want to know one last thing, which is
logical business questions. So
I really like that Juan, I think, probably disagrees with me on a fair amount and still tunes in. I listen to a lot of people I disagree with, and I appreciate it when people who disagree with me, like Travis, tell me, and we can have fun discussions with it. So that's how we'll continue the show.
Sometimes he'll send a text at 10 o'clock at night trying to get me going, but I ignore that. But let's not forget, though, even though Kim didn't give a shout out to us, don't miss the episode of Beers and Broadband that was just released on YouTube.
It's a classic. It's an instant classic.
It's awesome. And it's awesome.
I feel like, Travis, every time I've done a podcast anywhere, you're like the first one who sees it come out.
Oh, yeah. And I just keep waiting for the shout out to those, your Make-A-Wish program here you're doing at, Connect This. So, but nothing, crickets the whole time. So
we got in the chat. So if people want to watch it.
Oh, you have to watch it. I think I was viewer number 58. So
we're moving up. We're moving
highly
up.
Watched.
It's been a wonderful year. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Kim. Travis, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for hauling me along, guys.
Travis, it's been wonderful. Never would have done this show without you, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you, Rye, for being behind the scenes constantly.
Good job,
We're looking
Rye.
forward to
Yes.
seeing everyone again.
Thank you, Rye. We missed you last time, Rye.
Oh, badly.
And we love the people in the comments and people who watch later. Thank you all. Hope you have a wonderful holiday break. Have you a safe holiday break, and we'll see you back in January with some cold rants, some hot rants, all kinds of rants. So until then, this has been a fun episode of Connect This.